The beautiful Exuma-Cays. The Cays are a 209-kilometer stretch of about 365 islands located on the central Bahamas. For most of the Exuma's history, many of the inhabitants have lived in Georgetown on the Great Exuma Island, and most of the islands are uninhabited. There are many reasons why people travel to the Exuma-Cays, whether it's to get away from the stress of daily life, enjoy the nature of both the marine and terrestrial ecosystems, or participate in fun, recreational activities. Whatever the reason, people love to travel here, and one popular destination is the Exuma-Cays-Land-and-Sea-Park. The creation of the Exuma-Cays-Land-and-Sea-Park first came about through Ilya Tolstoy, grandson of famous Russian writer Leo Tolstoy. He brought together a group of conservationists upon realizing the Exuma Islands were under threat from developers who wanted to buy it. This group included Bahamian officials Oris Russell and Herbert McKinney, Robert P. Allen of the National Audubon Society, and environmentalists Carlton Ray, Dan Beard, John Randall, and Don Squires. During their expedition, they concluded that the area had, quote, outstanding natural values. The expedition group then created an organization through legislation in 1959 to obtain land and manage protected areas throughout the Bahamas that was modeled after the British National Trust. This organization would also act as, quote, the government's advisor on conservation matters and seek to educate Bahamians on the value of their natural heritage, end quote. On July 13, 1959, the Bahamas National Trust was created. The expeditions team's recommendations were followed, and the 176-square-mile Exuma-Cays-Land-and-Sea-Park was officially established. The Exuma-Cays-Land-and-Sea-Park is an IUCN Category 2 park. Category 2 parks are listed as large natural or near-natural areas set aside to protect large-scale ecological processes, along with complement of species and ecosystems characteristic of the area, which also provide a foundation for environmentally, culturally compatible, spiritual, scientific, educational, recreational, and visitor opportunities. It is easy to see why Ilya Tolstoy and so many others love this area. With beautiful terrestrial ecosystems and spectacular marine life, it is no wonder why this park is so popular. However, a place this magnificent is not free from problems or threats. To reduce threats and manage the area, the Exuma-Cays-Land-and-Sea-Park uses zoning. The different zones of the parks are Visitor Services, Park Administration, Multi-Use Lands and Sea, Non-Combustion Engine Use, and Sensitive Resource Areas, with Multi-Use Lands and Sea having the biggest zone. This tool is utilized in order to protect natural resources, ecosystems, and biodiversity from human activity. This tool seems to be effective, as according to a Bahamas report card in 2020, the Exuma-Cays-Land-and-Sea-Park has the healthiest coral reefs and biodiversity out of all the Bahamas with continuous visitation. The Bahamas National Trust has partnered with a range of different companies and organizations, from the Breeze Resort Bahamas and Sandy Port Resort, that likely donate to keep the stunning views of the landscape, to the National Audubon Society and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, that both collect data on the species and health of environments in the Bahamas. Other organizations that greatly help with conservation and research are the Shed Aquarium, that does research on the Bahamian rock iguanas, and the Nature Conservancy, that helps with several different projects. Management principles that relate to the Exuma-Cays-Land-and-Sea-Park are: threats to protected areas are inevitable, dealing with threats may require long-term activity, and effective community education may help to reduce threats to protected areas. These management principles are important to the threat of recreational impacts. Recreation is an activity that will likely always happen, and the park can't stop entirely, even if it was banned within the park borders. Recreation and leisure travel are what bring people to the park and, in turn, what provide a lot of funding. The problem is that people do not know how to properly recreate within the park and can end up damaging important parts of the ecosystem. Most visitors are from outside the country, and so teaching them how to be aware of the ecosystems in the Bahamas will take time. However, with proper signage and continued education, whether it is through websites or flyers when people travel into the country, will help to reduce the harmful effects of recreation. A couple of threats the park faces includes nutrient overload, invasive species, and recreation. Nutrient overload, also known as eutrophication, is the discharge of wastewater, fertilizers, and other nutrients that are carried off by waterways and directly into the ocean. Coral reefs are extremely sensitive to changes in the water and are therefore the most affected by nutrient overload. Nutrient abundance leads to more algae blooms, which can shift the marine community entirely. The park must also deal with invasive species that often enter the area through the development of commercial and residential areas. Invasive species are an issue because they can outcompete the native species and are harmful to the health of the Exuma ecosystem. One example is the casuarian plant, which can spread rapidly along the shoreline and take over the area. But a big threat to the park is the recreation that happens there. The main issues surrounding recreation are boating, wildlife disturbance, and poaching, as well as taking from the ecosystem. There are hundreds of boats a year that come into the park's borders, and unfortunately, there is usually a lack of knowledge of the ecosystems of the Keys and how to operate around them. As a result, reefs are damaged and animals are hurt due to boat collisions. Boat operators will sometimes dump pollutants from their boats into the water. Wildlife disturbance can come from those that are diving and snorkeling or hiking trails on the islands. If not done correctly, these tourist activities can stress the wildlife and result in them leaving the area. The park has also had problems with people rearranging structures of the ecosystems, both on land and in the water. Some tourists will also take wildlife or plants from the ecosystems. Taking wildlife from the park affects the reproduction of that species, as well as the ecology and health of that area. The decrease of fish and increase of pollution outside the park's borders are indirect threats that could contribute to the increase of recreation in the park. An underlying cause as to why people mistreat the wildlife is a lack of education on how to properly handle the wildlife or encouragement of this behavior from other recreational areas. However, there are ways that visitors can help prevent this. By following the park rules and regulations, as well as taking the time to learn about each ecosystem from the Bahamas National Trust website, will help to appreciate these areas more and prevent further harm to the environment and to wildlife. There are many unique ecosystems in the Exuma-Cays-Land-and-Sea-Park, from coral reefs to mangrove forests to blue holes. It is our job to do our part to ensure that the outstanding natural values that first founded this place are there for the next visitors and for future generations.